Welcome to Ask an Expert. I am so excited for two reasons today or tonight. The first reason is that we are taking on a topic that you guys are so interested in, that we're so interested in, and in the 2 years of Ride IQ, we've never covered it. And that is nutrition for the humans. So riders' nutrition so that we can take care of ourselves holistically as an athlete. Of course, we've gotten into equine nutrition a number of times already, so this has been a long time coming, and I know that you all are curious about it too. The second reason is because our expert is Doretta Wright. Doretta Wright is a registered dietitian and nutritionist, and she specializes in helping equestrians. And those are all amazing things, and I would be excited for that in general. But Doretta also has the best energy, which is so nice at the tail end of a day. So this is going to be a very fun conversation. And if you're here live and you have questions, as always, please put them in chat, and Kinsey and I will relay them. We have more than enough from before this conversation as well that we'll dig into and ask Doretta as well. But to start, Doretta, thank you so much for taking the hour with us today to get into this very important topic.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Let's start by getting to know you. So tell us about where you are and how your career brought you to the work that you do today.
Yeah, so I'm currently located at Fort Knox, Kentucky. We move around a little bit. I would say at this point I'm from North Carolina. I've spent the most time there. And so I grew up in Connecticut. I did Pony Club. I ended up in Southern Pines, North Carolina as a working student, went on to become a groom. I was actually grooming for Will Faudrey, and I was lucky enough to groom for him for many years. And it was when I was working with him that I noticed there was a gap in their rider care. Like, we took such great care of the horses, everything from nutrition and fitness to the whole deal. But the riders were just kind of blown in the wind. Like, they would work out and they would do things, but there really was no structure. So long story short, when I decided to go back to school, I was like, all right, well, I love food, I love horses, I love fitness. Let's see if we can combine the three. And I ended up becoming a registered dietitian nutritionist. So I had a great time in school. I worked with the director of sports nutrition at NC State and got a ton of experience in a variety of sports there. I did a lot with football and the Olympic sports. And then I also worked for an athletic development facility called Athletic Lab in Cary, North Carolina, which is, again, a great exposure to a lot of different types of athletes. But I always wanted to bring it back around full circle to working with equestrians. So here I am. Um, I've worked in the outpatient setting for many years now, and I actually also became a certified diabetes care and education specialist because I ended up working with a lot of people who have diabetes. And one of the things that I've learned over the years is that, equestrians come in all different shapes and sizes, and there's a whole spectrum of us, everyone from amateurs to, the upper level professionals, and we all have nutritional needs. And I think we should all be treated as athletes. So that's kind of the basis for where I'm coming from. I just want to help everybody ride their best, and to do that, they need to feel their best and be as healthy as they can be.
That is a really cool story. I didn't know that was your origin story. And of course, Will Faudrey, we've all been fans forever, but after getting to know him better on that recent podcast, I think I'm certainly a super fan. I think there's a lot of super fans out there.
Yeah.
Is your work today, are you working one-on-one as a nutritionist for primarily equestrian athletes, or is that like one cohort of your clientele?
Yeah, right now it's one cohort. I work with a lot of different people. But yeah, so it's just one cohort right now.
And do they come to you with all different sorts of goals? Will you kind of give us a picture, I guess, of
Yeah.
the different reasons that people could come to you, and then what your work over time with them looks like?
Yeah. So It kind of varies. I have a lot of people come to me for weight concerns. Everything from I just want to look better, I want to feel better, to I want to make life easier for my horse. Maybe they'll jump higher, run faster. Um, I definitely see a lot of people for gut health, like they're like having bloating, or maybe they're constipated, or maybe they're going a little too much. And so we do a lot of that, and especially like with nerves and anxiety, that can really affect your gut as well. So a lot of gut health, a lot of just general curiosity, wanting to make sure that they're maximizing their health and feeling their best through diet. I definitely field a lot of questions about supplements, or even just what is the best diet? Like, what do I need to be healthy? Should I be eating carbs? Should I be going keto? Like, what's the deal with this new thing that's supposed to be the magic cure-all? Um, so it really varies. There's so much that can go on, and there's so much in your life that's related to nutrition. So it's a
That
lot.
is so interesting. And especially in like today's environment, we are more inundated than ever with the new diets and the supplements, and we want to do the right thing and be healthy for whatever reason, whether it's look better, feel better, make our horse's
Mhm.
job easier. But all of those messages at once and not knowing how to wade through them, like really just choosing a course and
Yeah.
sticking to it is a hard first step. If you had to kind of summarize your approach with people, how would you how would you describe your philosophy around nutrition and food?
Yeah. So I have a food first philosophy. So I'm very clear about that. Usually, like I when they come to me, we'll do a full workup, lots of questions. I mean, I'm asking all sorts of questions to kind of get a big overview of not only what you're eating, but what your life is like, because your stress levels, your anxiety levels are going to play a role. Your schedule during the day is going to have an effect on how frequently or infrequently you're eating, and even your food choices. So go through a lot of questions, and then we'll start with what can you do from a food aspect. And then if you need to add in supplements, or we need to do additional testing and maybe see if there are some medications warranted depending on your situation, we'll go from there. But I always try to solve the problem, if there is a problem, with food first, and then go to supplementation or medication if necessary. Um, and then I feel like one of the big things that too often comes up is not necessarily a treatment plan that needs a physical action, but there's a lot of mental and emotional sides of it too, and your relationship with food, and how you're looking at food, and how you're viewing food. And like you were just mentioning, with all the things that are thrown at us, diet culture is huge. It is a $1 billion industry. There's so much advertising there, and we are constantly inundated with these messages that can often have a really negative effect on our relationship with food, how we view food, our relationship with ourselves and our body, and how we feel like the food we're eating is affecting our body. So sometimes it's more of a mental and emotional approach to food, versus just actually changing the food choices. Sometimes it's changing our attitude towards it.
I have so many questions. When you embark on understanding someone's relationship with food from a mental perspective, what are some of the tools you explore with them to make that a relationship that serves them in terms of wanting to make the choices, like the choices that they're striving to make?
Yeah, so we do a lot of reflection and mindfulness exercises. What would it look like if you ate this? What does the perfect day for you look like in terms of eating and doing all the things that you want to do? How do you fit those two things in? Um, so there's definitely a lot of mindfulness and just reflection, and how can we fit this in, and how can we be realistic with this? Like, that's the one thing that we miss out on, is realistic expectations when it comes to your eating and your life, and how you're going to overlap those two things.
Kinsey, I will let you ask a question. Otherwise, I will keep going for too long.
Yeah, so Doretta, I think a great place for us to not start because we've already kind of dove in, but a great place to go with this is kind of what should we be thinking about as athletes, as riders? What should we be thinking about as like what makes up a balanced diet on a day-to-day
Yeah.
basis?
Yeah. So, of course, fueling your body for exercise and activity. So, I think sometimes we forget that not only are we riding, but we're walking out to the field to get our horse. We're hugging, we're carrying water buckets, we're hauling hay, we're doing a lot of really physical demanding activities. So you need to fuel your body to do these activities. So really don't want to be skipping meals. You want to be eating breakfast. That's one of the most commonly skipped meals. But it literally means break the fast, like break fast breakfast. And so, wake up and fuel yourself for the day, especially if you are going to be in the barn all day and you have a lot of barn work, or maybe you're also hitting the gym. You need to provide yourself with some energy. So, not skipping meals, eating consistently throughout the day. That's going to be like every 3 to 5 hours. And then trying to have a balanced plate is going to include carbohydrates, protein, fat. So just having a little bit of everything on there. So, and it doesn't have to be complicated. It could look like in a breakfast sandwich with like, toast, eggs, a piece of cheese if you eat dairy. You could even put some tomato or onion, or you could throw in some vegetables with your eggs and kind of do like a scramble and put that on some toast. And there you go. You've got your carbs, you've got your protein, you've got some veggies in there. Eggs naturally have fat in them. So you've got a balanced meal right there. It doesn't have to be super complicated, but I think the biggest thing I see with riders is they're sometimes not eating at all.
We hear that too, especially when pressure gets involved, like as a show approaches or the day of a show. There's like no eating. There's no
Mhm.
eating, there's
Yeah.
coffee. When you are describing having your carbs, proteins, and fats in each meal, ideally, how do you advise clients on what the proportions of each are? Or do you prefer to just be like, have a mix of each in every meal, eat whole foods, don't overthink it?
Yeah. So sometimes it depends on the client and their relationship with food. But just in general, I love the plate method. So if you have your plate and you divide it in half, ideally one half of your plate would be fruits and non-starchy vegetables. Then one quarter of your plate would be your protein, and one quarter of your plate would be your carbohydrate. So, if you deconstruct your meal, can it fit into those sections? That's a great way to kind of make sure that you are getting in a balanced meal. Um, in terms of actual amounts, that would vary from person to person. But a good rule of thumb is to make sure that you're having, like 15 to 30 grams of protein with each meal, 30 to 45 grams of carbohydrate. Fat typically finds its way in there. If you put some butter on your toast, or if you're having an animal based protein, there's going to be fat in there. And then just trying to get in at least a handful of non starchy vegetables.
So I've heard that like, and this could be completely false, but I've heard you should try to have like 1 gram of protein per day of your like if you weigh 140 pounds, you should have 140 grams of protein. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's actually not too far off. So again, it's going to vary from person to person, but a more active individual is going to need a higher protein intake. So right about 1 gram per pound. Now, where that might change is if you are in a larger body and you really don't necessarily need 200 or 250 grams of protein per day. But I would say on average, you need at least 100. That's a blanket statement. Don't don't go crazy with it, but just on the average person needs at least 100 grams a day.
Don't worry, people know in Ask an Expert. This is not medical advice for you
Yes.
or your horse or whatever it is. Just trying to give people guidance, and that definitely applies today too.
Yes.
What are some habits that you don't necessarily endorse? So it sounds like intermittent fasting is something you don't necessarily endorse. Are there other things that like calorie counting, is that something that what feel about? What comes to mind in that bucket of things?
Yeah. So at this point, I used to almost always say like, yes, you need to track. You need to track all your macros. That way, you know exactly what you're eating. You know where your issue is if you're not reaching your goals, and then you can make changes. And now at this point, having been in practice for almost 10 years, I definitely know that for some people that can actually be really not helpful. It can cause almost obsessive thoughts and lead to disordered eating or even a full blown eating disorder. So, a little bit depends on the person and knowing yourself. I think for some people, it's super helpful to maybe create some more awareness around their food choices and how much they are taking in. But for others, it's going to put them in a bad place. They're gonna spiral down instead of spiraling up. So yeah. Um,
Kins, I'll let you go, but I just wanted to add my own experience with that because a friend of mine, probably like 6 months ago, saw a nutritionist, and the nutritionist told her, we're going to be tracking everything. I want you to write every single thing down. And I heard that and was like, that sounds so antiquated and so wrong. And I had all these ideas about it. And then it ended up being a program that worked great for her. And so since then, it's like everything in life, but it took this experience for me to be like, my way is not the right way. What works for me doesn't work for everyone. There is not, like, it's not black and white. And having this like open-minded approach, and this approach just like looking inward too and understanding yourself, really applies here like it applies everywhere. But it kind of took that experience for me to be like, yeah, it's not right or wrong one way or the other.
yeah, it's definitely person dependent.
Yeah, I feel like nutrition stuff, like it's a topic that whenever it comes up with my friends or something, I'm like, we're just not going to talk about this. We're not all going to agree on what the best approach is. Um, so for people who come to you and want to lose weight, where do you kind of start with them? And like, is there just like, are there like a couple of easy like rules of thumb as places to start?
Yeah. So with those people, I do generally do what's called a diet recall. So we'll go through like what they typically eat in a day and what that looks like. We'll also explore the mental and emotional side to it. Because I find that a lot of times when people come to me for weight loss, they don't have a healthy relationship with food. And sometimes that's really the first thing that we need to address. And then we can move on to adjusting the eating habits so that they are, setting themselves up for success to lose weight. So we might end up working on just our feelings towards food in general and making sure that we're not necessarily just emotionally eating or punishing ourselves for eating, because we need to eat. You can't live without eating. So you shouldn't ever be punished for eating. So we start there, and then we'll go forward into, for some people it is going to be tracking, because the awareness is huge, and it works wonders once they are like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was eating this many calories in a day, or I'm adding this to my food. I like it just as well without, but oops, sorry, dogs.
It's
So
no
loud.
problem. It's really
No
quiet.
worries. Don't worry.
Oops.
It wouldn't be an Ask an Expert if we didn't have a dog interrupt.
It truly happens. Probably at least 50% of the time.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I think we're good. Um, but so the tracking part can be huge for some people, and then for others, it's just a matter of maybe setting up some guidelines, like, okay, we don't eat after a certain time, not because it's unhealthy to eat after 8 or 9 p.m., but because by that point in the day, this person has typically already eaten enough and they are just mindlessly snacking at this point, or emotionally eating. There's no need to fuel their body past that point a day. So it helps reduce their total caloric intake to kind of set up some guidelines and curve the mindless eating a little bit.
Kinsey and I, if you're not watching the video, our heads were both nodding right along with you when you said, like, after 8 p.m., it's not, I mean, the eating has totally shifted into a different phase, which is like, something on the couch or just not filling your nutritional needs anymore. When you think about helping athletes and equestrians specifically, are there guidelines beyond, so they're having probably more than 3 meals per day? Like, I won't guess, will you kind of give us 5 or so kind of like tenets that they could follow that you generally are prescribing to athletes that would help them feel their best in terms of what they're putting into their body?
Yeah. So definitely eat within 2 hours of waking up. So get that breakfast in, and then eat every 3 to 5 hours after that, so that you're continuously fueling your body throughout the day. Ideally, you would stop eating 2 hours before you go to bed, because if you eat too close to bed, it can actually disrupt the quality of sleep. So, not necessarily inhibit you from falling asleep, but just disrupt the quality of sleep because your body is now like working to process the food you ate. So, those are my big things for meal timing. Hydration. Definitely need to eat throughout the day, and you most likely need to have some sort of electrolyte replacement. Water is not enough, especially in the really hot and humid climates, and you're wearing breeches and boots and a helmet, and it's just you need more. I get really frustrated with the hydration part because there's so many products out there, and a lot of times they look great, the marketing is fantastic, but if you actually read the label, they don't really have that many supplements in them, or not supplements, electrolytes. So, like, you need an electrolyte drink with sodium in it. And there's definitely a spectrum. Some are going to have a higher sodium amount, and those are going to be for people who are really heavy sweaters and who are super active. Like, they're riding 5 or 6 horses, they're cleaning stalls, they're sweating buckets. They're going to need more sodium. Those of us that are maybe only riding 1 or 2 horses and we're sweating but not that much, then you can get away with a lower sodium drink that maybe only has like 160, 170 um, milligrams of sodium. But you need that sodium. That is one time when you really do need salt. So make sure that you are hydrating not just with water, but with an electrolyte drink. And then I guess my last tenet would be that plate method to try to help make sure you're having your balanced meals, make sure you're getting a protein, a high fiber carbohydrate, and fruits and or vegetables with your meal.
I'm so glad you mentioned electrolytes. That is something that just came into my life this year, like in terms of my awareness of the need for it. Is there a specific product that you would recommend for the two categories you mentioned, the heavy sweaters versus the people who are maybe like sweating a little bit, so being a little active in a day, or even like I always wonder which electrolyte I should be choosing on days that I'm just working. Like I'm not
Yeah.
being active, but I should probably have something.
Yeah. Yeah. So for your really heavy sweaters, super active, I really like LMNT, or some people call it elements, but it's LMNT. And you can buy it in the powder form and just add it to your water bottle. For the kind of medium to low end, I really like Drip Drop. So again, you can just get the powder and add it to your water. And then if you're a little bit less, but you're still sweating, I actually love Gatorade. And Gatorade, now they make Gator Light and Gatorade Zero, maybe they call it, but it's going to have less sugar because part of the electrolyte replacement in these sports drinks is sometimes they do have those carbohydrates to give you a little bit of an energy boost. But if you don't necessarily need that energy or the calories, these are sugar-free options that don't have calories or have very few calories. The only caveat to that is they replace them with sugar substitutes, which is usually in the form of a sugar alcohol, which can have a laxative effect. So
Oh.
if you find yourself having to run to the bathroom, it could be if you had a sugar-free version, it's because it probably had sugar alcohols in it.
Interesting. I'm so
Yeah.
glad that you recommended the specific products because that's another one of those things. I'm getting targeted. So I'm like, these all look great. I hear about Element on every single podcast I listen to. And Drip Drop, I've tried and love it. And I
Yeah.
probably fall more in that category of like sweating a little bit. So I'll give myself permission to buy that now.
Yes.
You mentioned sugar alcohols or sugar substitutes having a laxative effect. Is there anything other than being cognizant that that could be a side effect with sugar substitutes, including like stevia or like drinking Diet Coke, anything that we should be like wary of with products like that?
Yeah. Yeah. So aspartame, of course, is always a big topic. That's what's in Diet Coke. It's in a lot of soda products. And it actually, there was a big study that came out this summer saying that it's, you know, going to cause cancer and this and that. And honestly, we don't really have a whole lot of human studies on it. We have a lot of animal studies, specifically rats. And in most of those studies, they were given their body weight in aspartame for days on end, which would be virtually impossible for us to consume. You could not drink enough diet soda to replicate this study, to replicate the negative effects that it showed. So, in the grand scheme of things, aspartame is safe to consume in small amounts. It's the dose that makes the poison. The World Health Organization did classify it as I think it's called a class 2 carcinogen. It's actually in the same classification as alcohol, which a lot of us have no trouble drinking. So it's not, moderation is key. But there aren't any direct effects like the sugar alcohols, which is if you see something that has like xylitol or sorbitol, anything that ends in ol, it's typically that's a sign that it's a sugar alcohol. Those are the only ones that have that direct, like acute, you might be running to the bathroom. So it's not a great thing to drink right before your ride time. If you're sensitive to it, if you know that you're fine with it, then go ahead. Um, but yeah, there isn't any other acute issues that I can think of. Now, we do see long-term intake of sugar substitutes or sugar alcohols can sometimes result in gut dysbiosis. So if you find yourself in this weird place, like maybe you're having some random bloating, sometimes you go back and forth between constipation and diarrhea because you can actually have both. You're maybe just kind of feeling a little lethargic. And then, you kind of look at your history. If you have a long-term intake of some of these sugar substitutes, sometimes we do see that they just kind of make your gut bacteria just a little off, for lack of better words. Um, but that's also person dependent. So it's very hard to say like, okay, if you drink this much for this many years, you're going to definitely have these side effects. It's such an individual response.
So you mentioned alcohol. How should we be I mean, I like how should we be thinking about this? I've heard a lot about like wine is like I mean the sugar content in wine is just it's a lot more than people know and or like the carbs in beer. I don't know. What are your thoughts? What is your overall thesis on consuming alcohol?
Yeah, yeah. So to be totally blunt, and this probably won't be popular opinion, but I mean, it's alcohol is toxic. So ultimately, your healthiest option would be to not drink it at all. Um, that being said, so that's like my professional dietitian opinion on it. I do still drink. I enjoy wine from time to time, and it's the dose that makes the poison. So if you are drinking in moderation, and that's like 1 to 2 drinks a day for women, 2 drinks a day for men, um, not drinking multiple days in a row, like, limiting it to only like 3 to 5 days a week at the most, you're most likely not going to see negative effects. That being said, alcohol can cause you to be dehydrated. It can slow your reaction time. and it can sort of dull your senses. So if it's really hot and humid out and you drank the night before and then you get up and you have an early ride time, you might not be as good as you could be had you not had any drinks the night before. So it's it's personal preference. Again, it's the dose that makes the poison. So ultimately, is it good for you? No, but can you have it and not have negative effects? Yes.
So you mentioned how it could affect your sleep and how you feel the next day. How does sleep relate to our food choices?
Hugely. Hugely. Yeah. So if you are tired, you're actually more likely to want to eat more, because your body's like, "Oh, I need energy. Like I need something to keep me awake and keep me going." So you're more likely to eat more when you're tired. You don't sleep as like your quality of sleep is not as well. So again, like if you are eating better, you're more likely going to sleep better. Uh, and then we just see overall a lack of just feeling well in general, because you're ultimately like just not you're not rested enough to go do what you want to do. Your food choices are probably going to be less than ideal because your body's going to say, hey, like that tastes really really good, and let's go for that. It's super filling and it's probably going to be something that's higher in fat and maybe less nutritional value, but it's going to be highly palatable, like like a big burger or a steak or something that's it's not that these foods are bad to have, but not necessarily the most nutritious options. So it just
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it just when you're tired, your food choices just generally become less um, less healthy, I guess. I just have a lack of I don't have the right word to describe that. It's just you're not making as good of food choices as you normally would.
I can definitely confirm feeling that. I think we've all been there. uh, so one, just not to like go back to it, but on the alcohol
Yeah.
topic, if you're going to drink, if you're gonna have a beverage, you're out to
Yeah.
dinner, what is the healthiest decision to make? Like, is it
Yeah.
a vodka soda? Is it a glass of champagne? Like where can we at least like on the spectrum of I'm going to drink, but I want to make the healthiest decision? Like what should we be leaning towards?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so red wine, like a drier red wine is usually a good choice. A light beer, they're going to be lower in carbohydrate and have a lower alcohol content, so that's typically a good choice. Any type of liquor, like just straight liquor, with either soda water or any type of sugar-free mixer. So when you start mixing in like a lot of juices and vermouth and sweeteners, that's when you're going to get in a lot of extra calories that you don't necessarily need. Like you look at some of those like big like chocolate martini cocktail type things, some of those drinks can have upwards of 6, 7, 800 calories. So you're now taking in a ton of calories that have virtually no nutritional value, and they're not doing anything for you except giving you extra calories. So trying to keep it to just like you said, a vodka soda, um, you know, maybe just a stiff whiskey, a light beer, or a glass of wine. Typically, your fruity, sweeter wines are going to have a higher sugar content, which again is just not it's not nutritionally valuable. So that's going to
There's
be
a lot of
yeah.
options there.
Yeah, there's
Um,
still a lot of options. It's just yeah.
I anecdotally, for a long time, like probably a year or so, was having a glass of wine each night and just like my unwind ritual. And I would always tell my friends, like, I'm just so lucky it doesn't affect my sleep. I feel great the next day. And then I took a couple months off doing that and I was like, oh my God, I'm embarrassed to admit that I feel a lot better and I feel more
Yeah.
well rested. And like, it was making my life easier in terms of making those like healthy choices that you mentioned and just feeling more kind of in control, I guess, of making the choices I wanted to make. So that was a good little experiment that I ran with myself. And I'm still like having a glass of wine at night, but much more thoughtfully, just having
Yeah.
kind of tested my theory, I guess. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it is amazing how well we adapt to not realizing that we're not feeling great until something's changed. Like you said, you kind of experimented and stopped drinking, you feel so much better. On that note, if you do want to drink, ideally try to have your drink 3 or 4 hours before going to bed. That way the alcohol doesn't disrupt your quality of sleep.
That's a great tip. Yeah. Um, so we've spoken about what some people might enjoy in the evening. Let's talk about what many people enjoy in the morning, which is coffee. Are there
Mhm.
any guidelines around coffee intake? When to have your first cup? How much to have? Is it? My biggest mystery zone on this topic is gut health, and I'm sure coffee is related to that. So I'm just gonna hand it over to you with coffee as the topic.
Yeah. Yeah, so coffee, yeah, everybody loves coffee, or so many of us do. And it's great, it's warm, it's comforting. There's an emotional attachment to coffee for sure. So it's important to sometimes honor that and to honor that emotional commitment that you have to this thing that you love and it starts your day. It's actually quite good for you. It can help keep things moving. It comes from a bean. It's actually a very natural thing. It's when we add all the sugars and the, you know, pump of caramel and the whipped cream or whatever, all these extra things that it can turn into, again, a really high caloric, low nutrient density drink. So ultimately, the best way to drink your coffee, the healthiest way is black. So it's super boring. um, but if you really wanted to maximize it, that's the way to do it. But if you did add a little bit of sugar or cream to it, that's not the end of the world. Like in the grand scheme of things, if you're adding a small amount, it's not going to have a huge impact on your nutrition or on your total overall health. But if you're adding a lot and you're doing it every day, then it can add up. So it's that moderation thing that comes into play again. In terms of gut health, for some people, it's actually really good because it does help keep things moving. For others, it's almost moves a little too well. And that might, again, that's going to be your individual reaction to it. The other big thing with coffee is the caffeine content. So if you're drinking several cups of coffee a day and taking in an excessive amount of caffeine, that can also have effect on your sleep, even like your anxiety levels, and like you might get a little jittery. Um, so you might want to look at that. But generally, 1 to 2 cups a day is totally healthy. It's not going to hurt anything.
Yeah, I had like I wouldn't say a coffee addiction, but I was very reliant on coffee for many years and was having like several venti sized black coffees a day at my desk. And then I was finally like, okay, I have to stop. And so I actually haven't had caffeine in like almost 4 years.
Wow.
And it's so weird. Now it's just like I don't know, I don't need it. But I'll sometimes be like, okay, I'm really craving a latte. So I'll get like a decaf latte or whatever it is. But coffee is a weird thing because it is so emotional. Like just the smell of it is like it smells good. So
Mhm.
um but that's good to know that it has benefits in addition to tasting good. Um so we hear a lot about fad diets. And I think you even maybe have mentioned keto in like your opening intro. But like, what are your thoughts on the different fad diets? How should we be deciphering like what's real, what's not, and what's right for you as an individual?
Yeah. Yeah. So, like some major red flags, like when you hear about this new wonderful diet that's going to cure everything, major red flags are always like anything that eliminates an entire food group. So, all the food groups have beneficial vitamins, nutrients, and you really do truly need them all to be healthy. So, unless you have an allergy or some type of medical condition that you can't eat something, you should ideally be eating it. So if you see, some new thing that comes out and it's like, oh, don't eat any carbohydrates of any kind, that's pretty much keto. Is like only 10% of your calories are coming from carbs. The rest is all fat and protein. But, really, if you don't do keto right, and if you really need to be checking your blood ketone levels to make sure they are actually in ketosis, to make sure you're truly doing keto. Um, Otherwise, really, the protein that you eat is going to be turned into sugar. Your body will naturally turn that protein into glucose, and you'll won't be in ketosis. So I'm not a fan of the keto diet at all. There are some medical conditions that it's helpful for, but again, it's to do it properly and to still make sure that you are getting the nutrients that you need from carbohydrates, since they're in such a low amount from your food diet. You really need to be working with a medical professional so that you don't come up on nutritional deficiencies. Um, some other diets you see, like Atkins, is going to be high protein, low carb. Um, Trying to think. There's a lot of other, like, just very restrictive, like, only 1,200 calories a day or no dairy. I really encourage you, unless you have an allergy or an intolerance, don't eliminate it, because there's most likely going to be, or there is, beneficial nutrients in it, especially when you think about dairy. It is a major source of vitamin D for us. So most of the time now, even though us horsey girls were outside, we're usually wearing, like, you know, long sleeve sun shirts and hats with visors. So we're really not getting as much sun as we think. So you really need to get that vitamin D from your food, and milk is a major source, because it's usually fortified with vitamin D. So if you don't need to eliminate it, I don't encourage you to do it. So that comes back to that well-rounded plate. Um, Trying to think what other fad diets I hear about a lot. Oh, gluten. Gluten's another one. And I, again, like, gluten. So I have had some people that are like, all right, I want to lose weight, I'm going gluten free. And they end up losing weight, because you know what else they ended up doing? They stopped eating all the cookies and the ding dongs and the Twinkies, and they stopped doing all the fast food, and all these not necessarily healthy foods that have gluten in them. The downside to that is you miss out on some foods that do have a lot of benefits, like whole grains. So, um, and that person we worked together and was like, all right, well, let's maybe incorporate just some of these foods here to make sure that you are getting the fiber that you need, because whole grains are a major source of fiber, and a lot of us don't get enough fiber. So, yeah, that's I'm trying to come back to the original question now.
No,
Fad
I think you
diets.
addressed it. Like,
Okay.
the other ones, they also listed paleo, but it sounds like
Oh, yeah.
yeah, go ahead on paleo.
Yeah, so paleo is another one that the premise of it is I can get behind, right? Like eating more whole foods, like foods that are less processed. But it excludes dairy, it excludes gluten, and there are a lot of benefits to those things. So I think my takeaway from paleo is trying to eat less of the highly processed foods. So again, that's going to be your fast food, it's going to be the chips and the cookies and sugary cereals, and eating more fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins. Um, but yeah, paleo. The other thing about paleo is, if you're, again, truly following it, you have to make most of your food from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about you guys, but I'm trying to ride my horse every day. I'm trying to go to work every day, and I've got 2 kids I got to chase around. I'm not making much food from scratch. Like, it's just not realistic.
I have not made food from scratch in a while. And I don't have kids or a horse, actually. These fad diets, I have tried them. I am not immune to all of the temptation of the promises of these diets and wanting a quick way to drop weight. And fortunately, that was, 10 years ago that I was getting tempted by those sorts of things. But it does feel like, you started this conversation by telling us how important our relationship with food is and with our bodies are. And for me, it was always so detrimental in that respect that at the end of it, I was back to square one and ultimately had to address the bigger issue that would let something be sustainable and just feel right. And I think that you just gave us a really, really clear guidance around the fad diets that exist and that will inevitably crop up. It's nice to have some understanding as an individual about how you want to kind of interpret and approach those things. So thank you for that. You also just mentioned how impractical it can be to be making elaborate meals. And I already had written in my notes to ask you, what are some good quick options for nutritious snacks or meals that you recommend to people?
Yeah. Yeah. So I love just a good peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So easy, goes everywhere. That's definitely a really good, quick and easy one. Eggs, you can cook eggs in the microwave. If you have a hot plate, like you're staying in a hotel, again, you can make eggs there. Um, Protein bars, and again, there's a lot of different protein bars out there. So it just kind of depends on your personal preference, but Kind bars are great, RX bars are great. Um, Trying to think. Even the Nutri-Grain bars, they don't have a ton of protein in them, but they travel really well. So if you needed something quick and easy, of course, fruit and vegetables. If you can snack on some baby carrots or maybe dip it in some hummus, if you need to dip it in some ranch because that's how you like it and you're more likely to eat it that way, go for it. Like if that's what you need to get your veggies in, go for it. It's more important to eat the veggies than to not eat them. Fruit is always a great option. Canned tuna or canned chicken, you can make into a quick salad. I love a wrap, and there's actually these wraps. They're made by Mission, and they're called Carb Balance, and they have 15 grams of fiber in one wrap, which is fantastic. We actually need 25 to 38 grams of fiber per day, and most of us don't get that. So I love those wraps. Throw some grilled chicken or even like some deli turkey in there with a handful of salad greens. And you've got your carb, you've got your protein, you've got some vegetables right there. So there's your balanced meal. Um, okay, so this is another favorite that's really inexpensive. And again, early on in my career, I would have been like, absolutely not. Do not ever eat this. It's not real food. Um, but I've evolved. And ramen noodles, if you add frozen broccoli, so keep frozen broccoli in your freezer, throw some ramen noodles in the water. Throw your ramen in there, throw your frozen broccoli in there while the water is boiling. Crack an egg in there when it's just about done eating and mix it up. Even crack two, you'll get some more protein that way. And again, you have your carb, you have your vegetable, and you have some protein. And that is like one of the ultimate comfort food meals. It's so warm, especially coming into fall. And ramen's like 38 cents a packet. So super inexpensive.
Such a hot tip. I love that. I have this woman who would come up on my TikTok page every so often, and she would like take basically like a classic food like Kraft mac and cheese, and she'd be like, she's a nutritionist. She's like, let me make this a balanced meal, and yeah, I was basically adding in like broccoli or whatever it is, but or like protein of some sort.
Yep.
So that sounds exactly like what you're outlining there. So for a lot of people, I think eating healthy like on Monday is really easy. And then you get to like Thursday and Friday and Saturday, and it's like it just gets harder as the week goes on. What kind of tips do you have in order to try to stave that off? And maybe it's meal prepping, or kind of what do you recommend to your clients in order to make sure that they keep it up throughout the week?
Yeah, so that's twofold answer there. The first is yes, definitely meal prep. Set yourself up for success. Have the foods available so that it's quick grab and go, and it's not, it's a barrier to eating well isn't the access. The second part of that is your approach to it. So are you restricting yourself earlier in the week? Like, oh, I can't have that. I can only have these, and I got to be really good. And you've got this whole mentality of good versus bad. And if you are, then yes, you're more likely to fall off as the week goes on, or even just to have the mentality of, I'm going to be really good and then I'm going to have a cheat day. And it's like, no, you don't need cheat days. We need a lifestyle. We need to blend these. And that's what balance is about, is having a blend of, yes, I'm going to have like this wonderful baked salmon with asparagus and wild rice and this like super uber healthy meal. And then you know what, maybe later on you have a cup of ice cream, as a dessert or something. And like, no, should you be eating ice cream and brownies and cookies every single day to excess? No. But if you are constantly restricting yourself from those foods, you just want them more. So finding that balance of integrating, 80, 70, 80% healthy with a good 20 to 30% of less healthy foods is really helpful so that you're not feeling like you're constantly on or coming off, right? Like we're just going to be a more even keel.
I like that advice a lot. Yeah, the cheat day thing is a wild approach. Um, okay, we have a question in chat that I want to make sure we get to. It's from Krista. She is asking about supplements and vitamins. And I know you mentioned starting with food first, but I'm sure supplements and vitamins come into play quite a bit. Krista specifically said she's reading a book on the liver, so she's becoming obsessed with how to care for her liver. And I'm sure there's a lot of varieties of different things that we could really like hone in on. But when you think about supplements and vitamins, are there any that are like the most common that you are adding to somebody's routine?
Yeah. So I want to start with that saying, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So unless you have a deficiency of a specific nutrient, you most likely don't need to supplement with it. That being said, a multivitamin is a great sort of insurance plan, so to speak, to make sure that you are having a well-rounded, you're getting just all the nutrients that you need. Um, Especially like for women that are thinking of starting a family or maybe have recently started a family, prenatals with DHA and EHA are really beneficial even after you've had a baby. So, big fan of those. And then otherwise, just a good old fashioned multivitamin. I do encourage you to buy supplements that are third party tested. So, either NSF or Informed Choice or USP. They'll have like a little logo on the label that will show you whether or not it's been third party tested. And that way, what is in there is actually what's in there. The supplement world is kind of the wild, wild west. There's not a whole lot of regulation to it. So the third party testing is pretty important. In terms of liver, sometimes we'll see these things that come out and they're like, oh yeah, detox, and there's detox teas and detox pills. And honestly, unless you have a medical condition where your liver and your kidneys aren't working properly, your body is extremely efficient at detoxifying itself. So generally, you're wasting money, at least like at the lesser end extent of damage, you're wasting money. The greater extent is some of these supplements, if taken in too high a quantity, can have negative health effects. So being mindful of that and looking at, again, the label, what is the dose on there? And it's usually a good idea to consult with your doctor or your dietitian is in regards to, is this something that you need and is it the right dose for you?
Any ideas for those who have heads and supplementing for that? HEDS, is that? Might need
H-
clarification. Amy, maybe need clarification on
yeah.
that.
What?
We'll see if Amy has clarification on that.
Okay.
In the meantime, Catherine is looking for a protein bar that is nut-free or soy-free because of allergies. Do you have any suggestions?
Nut free and soy free. I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head. Um, I don't remember if RX bars are. I think there are some that are nut free. I'm not sure if they're soy free. That's a tough one. I don't know of one off the top of my head. I would have to look. Is the
Yeah,
heads is that referring to Ehlers-Danlos? Is that their?
she hasn't clarified yet.
Okay. I'm guessing it's Ehlers-Danlos. Um, which again, I would say you really should probably work with your doctor on that, and just to also make sure any other medications or supplements you're taking There isn't like a blanket, like, oh, you should definitely be taking this that I can think of.
It's wild. I'm Googling nut-free and soy-free protein bars. I'm surprised that it's this hard to find.
That would be very, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of protein bars have one or the other in them. So that,
Interesting.
yeah, I can't think of any off the top of my head. The RX bars are the ones that maybe I can think might reach that, but I don't know. You'd have to look. And it might even be not all RX bars. It might be certain ones that fit that criteria. That can be hard when you're having to avoid all of those.
I think there's a bar called 88 Acres that looks like it might be nut and soy free, but the poor person, I can't see who it is in chat, but in all caps, she's like, it's so hard. My
It's
allergies are the worst.
yes, yes. I really do feel like for those that have allergies like that, or like an egg allergy too. Eggs are in so many things, and yeah, that's tough.
One thing that I wanted to make sure that we get to, and I can't believe that we've already been chatting for an hour, but one thing that I wanted to make sure we get to, and I guess that we can kind of cap the conversation with, is your philosophy around good foods and bad foods and deciphering what falls into what category if need be.
Yeah. Yeah. So honestly, my philosophy is there are no bad foods. There is a spectrum of the healthfulness of foods. So you are definitely going to have foods that are higher on that spectrum. They are uber healthy, like blueberries, broccoli. Your non-starchy vegetables, your fruits. They're the top of that spectrum. They're super healthy. And then at the bottom of the spectrum, you're going to have foods with very little nutritional value. That's typically like your fast food, your highly processed food. So like sugary cereals. And there's a place and a time for all of them. 'Cause food it's first, it's fuel for our bodies, but it's emotional, it's comforting, it's celebratory, it's traditional and cultural, and it's important to embrace all of those things and to allow food to be those things for you too, and to recognize that you can eat the cookie if like you can eat a cookie. It doesn't make you a bad person, and it's not going to completely derail all your efforts. Now, if you're consistently eating a lot of fast food and a lot of highly processed foods, then yeah, you're probably going to see some health conditions come up and you're probably not going to feel great. And you would need to maybe change it so that maybe you're only eating those things. Maybe at first you cut down. I see a lot. I'll divert a little bit. Like eating out. Eating out is something
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of people will do daily, and they don't even realize it. Like they're hitting the drive-through on the way to work, on the way to the barn. They hit up McDonald's, and they don't even consider that eating out. But it's eating out. So sometimes the beginning of like improving your health is just cutting it back to like, okay, instead of doing that 7 days a week, I'm going to cut back to 5 days a week, and have maybe make overnight oats or have something prepped for breakfast, so that I'm only can start weaning myself off of this habit. So allowing yourself to take it in phases and allowing yourself to eat the foods that you enjoy. And then also, of course, be mindful of your goals and be realistic with yourself. Like, okay, if I want to get from A to B, there's going to be a bunch of steps in between. And I need to take small steps to get there, especially when it comes to food and nutrition. We can't just all of a sudden do a 180 and expect to be that awesome fitness model. Like it doesn't happen that quickly, and it's going to take a long time to facilitate change. So remembering that all foods can fit and that it's a process, and that balance and is going to include enjoying food too, and not having this like, oh, I can't have that. You can have it. You're allowed. It's just the degree that you have it is going to dictate your results.
I love
So
that.
that's
That is really perfect advice to end on. I also, I guess to truly end, where can people find you? Are you currently taking on clients, etc.?
yeah. So I'm on Instagram as equestrian.dietitian. I should probably double check, make sure that is my So I do try to keep up with social media and like posting things fairly regularly. And I have a website, so rightnutritionusa.com. I am taking on clients. I can do one-on-one. I've been doing like clinics. So like just coming to the barn and doing like a just kind of an overall healthy diet, sports nutrition for equestrians, or if you wanted a specific topic, we could do that. Like I've done like meal prepping clinics, or like how do you create a meal plan and then how do you prep it, and things like that. So those are also options. And my contact info is on my website. It's on my Instagram. I'm on TikTok as well. I think I'm not sure if it's Doretta Wright or equestrian dietitian. But yeah, so I often share just some fun nutrition tips there. I've got a couple meal plans that you can purchase there just to kind of give you an idea of like what does a healthy week look like. And yeah, there's some free resources on there as well, like a meal planner and the steps for planning your meal and then writing it out in your grocery list and whatnot.
Oh,
So
cool. Well,
yeah,
one thing that is fortunate is that you have a very unique name. So if you
Yeah.
Google Doretta Wright, WRIGHT, I know from experience that she is the first result that comes up. Her
Yeah.
website will show up and you'll find her in all the places and those resources she just mentioned. Doretta, it was such a pleasure to hear more about your story, and thank you for teaching us everything you just shared. I think it was immensely helpful and long overdue for Ride IQ.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And thank you everyone for tuning in. Have a wonderful rest of the day.